I'm a single guy in my mid-30s. This happened a few years back, during a rough period in my life. I had just gone through a breakup with the woman I thought I'd marry one day and start a family with. It hit me hard. I was completely lost. The emotional toll was intense. I spent weeks barely functioning, sulking, forgetting to eat, and not taking care of myself. I'd wake up, go to work without saying a word to anyone, come home, and crawl back into bed. Weekends were worse. I'd stay in all day, sometimes not eating at all, just binging one movie after another without even paying attention. They were all a blur. But enough of the sad part, I'm doing much better now. Still, I sometimes wonder about the life I could have had if things had gone differently. Anyway, it was a Saturday night. I was slumped on my bedroom couch, barely moving except to hit play on another movie. I couldn't tell you what it was, just another forgettable action flick. For context, I was upstairs in my room. I have a couch and a TV in there, so I rarely watch anything elsewhere in the house. At one point, I glanced at my phone. My mom was calling me again, probably for the fourth or fifth time that day. I didn't want to ignore her, but I let it ring. I just wasn't in the mood to talk or answer questions about whether I'd eaten or gone outside. Eventually, I got tired of whatever was playing and went back to the menu. I wasn't really interested in anything, but I clicked on some random horror movie I'd never heard of. The thumbnail was grainy, and it looked low budget. I figured I'd half watch it until I passed out. About 20 minutes in, I realized it was worse than I expected. The sound design was awful. I had to crank the volume way up just to hear the dialogue, then a random sound effect would come in way too loud. But for some reason, I kept watching. Maybe I was just too lazy to change it again. Then I started noticing a strange sound. A sharp, metallic clang, like a pipe hitting concrete. It didn't match anything on screen. No characters were near metal, and no scenes were set in a warehouse. It wasn't even timed with the jump scares. It just popped in every minute or so, like it had been accidentally looped in. Same sound, same volume, same pitch, too consistent to be a coincidence, and way too weird to be an intentional choice. The terrible quality of the movie made it oddly hard to stop watching. Part of me was entertained by how bad it was, and another part of me just wanted to see how far it would go. Halfway through, I got up to use the bathroom and for whatever reason actually paused the movie. When I came back and sat down, I hovered my finger over the play button, and that's when I heard it again. The metallic clang. But the movie was paused. I froze. The screen was silent and still, but the sound had been loud and unmistakable, and it had come from inside the house. That's when it hit me, it had never been part of the movie. I stayed perfectly still, trying to convince myself I imagined it. I just stared at the screen and listened. Then, not even a minute later, it happened again. The same clang. I jumped up, grabbed a knife from my desk, and began checking every room in the house. My heart was racing. I searched everywhere, closets, corners, under beds. Nothing, no one, no sign anything was out of place. But as I walked back upstairs, heart still pounding, I heard it again. This time it was quieter. That meant it was coming from my room, where I had been watching the movie, but I'd been in there the whole time. It didn't make any sense. Then I remembered. I had left a couple of windows open. It was spring, and the weather had finally started warming up. Maybe, just maybe, the sound had been coming from outside this whole time. I wasn't sure why, but that idea scared me even more. I moved to the window and peeked through the curtain. My backyard came into view, and there it was. One of the deck chairs was sitting in the middle of the lawn, and standing beside it was a kid, a small kid. It was too dark to see his face clearly, but his outline was unmistakable, far too small to be an adult. He was holding what looked like a long plastic pipe. That explained the noise. He must have seen me at the window, because the moment I looked out, he smacked the pipe against the chair. I stumbled back from the window, heart racing. I know it sounds ridiculous, being scared of a kid, but I couldn't wrap my head around why he was there. Was he lost? Did he have some kind of condition? And then it hit me, he'd been standing out there for nearly an hour. That thought chilled me to the bone. I tried to stay calm, thinking maybe he had wandered from a nearby house. Maybe he was confused and didn't know how to get home. I told myself I had to do something, so I made my way downstairs slowly and quietly. I even turned on the porch light, hoping it would make things less scary for him, or at least let me see his face better. But the moment I put my hand on the door, I froze. Something felt off, like I was walking into a trap. If he were truly lost, wouldn't he ring the doorbell, call out? Even if he were scared, would banging a pipe on furniture for that long really be his go-to move? Something about it didn't add up. A deep gut feeling told me not to open that door, so I backed away slowly. I crept over to a narrow window beside the door that overlooked part of the porch and backyard. I tilted the blinds with 2 fingers and peeked through. And that's when I saw them. 2 men, dressed in all black, crouching just below the back door, ready to ambush whoever opened it. One of them turned suddenly and locked eyes with me. I dropped the blinds and ran. I called the police, hands shaking, and rushed upstairs. Just as I reached the bathroom and locked myself in, I heard the banging. They were trying to break in. I was panicking, struggling to breathe. Then came the sound of a crash, followed by heavy footsteps downstairs. They were inside. I heard them coming up the stairs. The bathroom doorknob twisted slightly. Then, a loud bang. They were trying to kick the door in. That broke me. I screamed at the top of my lungs that the police were on their way. And just like that, the footsteps turned and ran. A few seconds later, a door slammed. Silence. The police arrived not long after. I told them everything. But I didn't have any cameras and I couldn't provide much helpful detail. The only part that really made them take notice was the involvement of the child. They said that using a kid in something like this meant the people behind it weren't just impulsive. They were calculated, willing to go way further than most. And that's the part that haunts me the most. I don't like thinking about that kid. Every possible explanation is disturbing. The police said it was likely a random attack, but I've never fully believed that. It all felt too planned. Nothing's happened since. I've moved on, built my life back up. But I still think about that kid and hope, somehow, he's okay, even if the odds are slim. I'm a senior, just a few weeks from graduating. Let me go on a quick rant. I never understood how most of my friends managed to survive those week-long spring break trips to places like Miami or other party spots. I just can't do it. Every year of college, spring break has been my time to go home and recharge. This last spring break was no different. I went completely off the grid for a week, taking a break from non-stop schoolwork and pointless drama. Honestly, I was pretty pissed because I'd just submitted a perfect regrade request for a midterm, and my TA rejected it for no good reason. Anyway, it was a Monday morning. I didn't have any real plans except getting a workout in. I've always been a morning workout guy. It's the one thing that makes me feel like I have my life together. Even though I was home for break with nothing on the agenda, I still set my alarm and dragged myself out of bed early. I figured if I hit the gym early, I could beat the rush. By the time I was dressed and out the door, it was still early. The drive to the gym takes about 15 minutes, mostly quiet back roads through residential neighborhoods. Nothing ever really happens out there. It was a great place to grow up, but it started feeling kind of boring once I got older and all my childhood friends moved on. As I was driving, listening to some music, something strange caught my eye. An ice cream truck parked along the curb. Engine off, no lights. In the summer, sure, that might be normal, but this was early spring, still kind of chilly out, and kids were in school. There was absolutely no reason for an ice cream truck to be sitting there that early in the morning. It just looked wrong. I slowed down as I passed, just enough to peek through the window. Empty. I turned the corner and left it behind, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. It wasn't just the weird timing. It was that I didn't remember ever seeing an ice cream truck in our neighborhood, not even as a kid. We just weren't that kind of area. I eventually shrugged it off and focused on my workout. Afterwards, I grabbed a quick bite and headed home, feeling productive. But when I turned onto the same street from earlier, the ice cream truck was still there, parked in the exact same spot. That made me stop. In this neighborhood, people are the type to freak out if someone parks in front of their house for too long. I remembered a time when a grumpy neighbor gave my friends and me a hard time just for waiting outside her house, even though we were picking up someone next door. So yeah, I figured someone would have called about it by now. My curiosity got the better of me. Instead of going straight home, I circled the block and passed the truck again, just to see if someone was inside. This time there was. And I must have been too obvious about slowing down, because the guy in the driver's seat locked eyes with me. He looked wrong. His nose was long and sharp, almost cartoonish. He had a scraggly beard, the kind that hadn't seen a razor in years. He genuinely looked like someone who lived out of his vehicle. I got this immediate, uncomfortable vibe and drove straight home. My parents were at work, so I had the house to myself. I spent the next few hours just killing time. Later that afternoon, I went out to check the mail, and when I reached the end of the driveway, I glanced down the street and froze. The same ice cream truck was there again, parked across the street a few houses down. It wasn't facing me, but I knew it wasn't a coincidence. I didn't move at first. I just stood there, heart pounding, trying to make sense of it. Had that guy followed me home? I knew he had. I grabbed the mail and walked calmly back inside, pretending I hadn't noticed. Once I was upstairs, I went to a guest bedroom with a window that had a better view of the street. I peeked through the curtain. The truck was still there. I watched it for a few minutes. Nothing happened. I don't even know what I expected, but I couldn't look away. Eventually, I forced myself to get back to my laptop. I tried to focus on other things, but every half hour or so, I'd find myself back at the window. Every time I looked, the truck had moved. It wasn't gone, just in a slightly different spot. That meant the driver was deliberately moving around the street. I wasn't sure if I should call the police or not. Nothing had really happened, right? Looking back, I wish I'd either ignored it or called the cops, but I was too curious. My older brother is really into bird watching, so I knew he had a pair of binoculars somewhere. I found them and went back to the window. I pulled the curtain aside and focused on the truck. I wasn't ready for what I saw. Through the driver's side window, I saw the man from earlier. But he wasn't just sitting there. He was staring back at me, with a pair of binoculars of his own. The moment he realized I was watching, he dropped the binoculars, started the truck, and drove off. I was horrified. That guy had been watching me and my house for hours, after literally following me home. That's when I finally called the police. I didn't even know what I expected. I just didn't know what else to do. I told them about the ice cream truck, the man watching my house, and how he drove off when I looked back at him. The dispatcher was calm. She said they'd send someone to patrol the area and keep an eye out. It shouldn't be hard to spot an ice cream truck, she said. That night, I told my parents everything when they got home. They were concerned, but told me not to worry too much. I was exhausted and ended up falling asleep pretty quickly. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. Not sure why. I grabbed my phone and noticed the time. As I sat there, I heard something, very faint music. At first, I could barely tell what it was, but as I listened, panic began to rise. It was the jingle of an ice cream truck. Before I could react, I heard a soft click against the glass of my bedroom window. Someone was throwing rocks. That must have been what woke me up. The music wasn't loud enough on its own. I sat frozen, staring at the wall. I kept telling myself to look out the window. Just check. But I couldn't move. I felt paralyzed. Eventually, I forced myself to do it. I crept toward the window, stood to the side, then peeled the curtain back in one swift motion. There he was, standing in the middle of my front yard, and on either side of him, holding his hands, were two small children, or at least they looked like children. I couldn't really tell, it was too dark. I didn't waste another second. I ignored the pounding in my chest, stepped away from the window, and ran to wake my dad. I had already called 911 before he even got downstairs. My dad's a tough guy, so I figured he'd want to handle it himself, but by the time we got outside, the man was gone. The police arrived later, but nothing ever came of it. A few days passed, and I had to head back to school. My parents promised to stay on high alert. That was weeks ago. Nothing strange has happened since. But the reason I'm writing this now is because a few days ago, my mom called. She said a missing persons case just went public in our hometown. 2 6-year-old twins, a boy and a girl, had vanished from a neighborhood about half an hour from ours. The moment she said it, my mind went back to that night. To those two small figures standing on either side of the man in our yard. It makes me sick to think about it. Why would that guy stalk me, watch my house, throw rocks at my window in the middle of the night? Why go to such lengths if he was involved in something as serious as kidnapping? Maybe he thought I saw something. Maybe he was trying to scare me into silence. But if he really had those kids, wouldn't he want to avoid attention? And then there's the most haunting question: were the kids already with him that first morning I saw the truck, or did he find them later? I can't stop thinking about it. The only explanation I can come up with is that someone who would do something like that doesn't think like the rest of us. Maybe that's why he was willing to risk everything, just to mess with me. My mom followed up with the police, trying to see if there was any connection. If anything else happens, I'll write again. This happened last spring. I'm a sales associate for BMW, so my weeks are pretty busy. When I'm not at the dealership, I'm answering my phone. Because of all the phone work involved, sometimes I feel like I have more to do when I'm not at work, as funny as that sounds. Because of the nature of my job, I pretty much have to answer my phone every time it rings, especially when it's an unknown caller. So, as you'd expect, I get a lot of scam calls. But I have no choice but to answer, just in case it's a client or an interested party. One night, sometime after 10, my phone started ringing. It was a number I didn't recognize. Normally I would have picked up without thinking, but this time I was already in bed, halfway through winding down. Something about how late it was made me let it ring out. They didn't leave a voicemail. I figured if it was important they would. But a few minutes later, the same number called again. I sat up and answered it. I was a little irritated, but I still tried to keep my voice polite just in case it was someone serious. At first, all I heard was static, just this thick, uneven fuzz. I was about to hang up when I caught something underneath it. A voice. I held the phone closer and listened. It was my voice. I was completely sure of it. That actually made me freeze. After a few seconds, I realized it wasn't just a random clip of me talking. It was a conversation I'd had earlier that day with a client. Just standard stuff. Pricing, availability, setting up a test drive. Nothing sensitive, but it was definitely real. Definitely me. I still don't know if it was the right decision, but I instantly hung up. I sat there for a while, just staring at my phone, trying to make sense of what I just heard. I wasn't panicking, but I definitely wasn't calm either. The best way I can describe it is a mix of confusion and unease. My first thought was maybe it was the client I had talked to earlier. Maybe he'd accidentally called me while trying to play back the call or record it for his own notes. I don't know. It felt like a stretch, but it was the only explanation that didn't spiral into something worse. That still didn't explain why the number was unknown and not the one he had used earlier, but it was the best I could come up with. The next morning, I decided to call him back just for my own peace of mind. He answered right away and seemed totally normal, friendly even. But when I brought up the call from the night before, he had no idea what I was talking about. He sounded genuinely confused. I apologized for the mix-up and hung up. For whatever reason, I believed him. The rest of the day was normal. I had a few appointments, followed up with some leads. Nothing out of the ordinary. I didn't think too much about the night before, until later that evening, around the same time, I got another call. The number wasn't saved in my phone again, but it was different from the first. This time, I answered immediately. And exactly what I was dreading happened. It was another static-heavy recording of a conversation I'd had that day. A different client. A completely different conversation. I hung up again without saying anything. That night is when it really started getting to me, because now it felt intentional. I also noticed something else. The recordings didn't include the client's voice. It was only me talking, like a one-sided call. I started wondering if someone had been listening in on my conversations and recording me somehow. I didn't sleep well that night. I couldn't stop thinking about it. But I didn't know what to do. I never thought I was a paranoid person, but the next week of my life proved me wrong. Every night for a week, the same thing happened. I'd get a call from a random number and hear a staticky recording of a conversation I'd had that day. I started recording the calls myself. I can't even tell you why. I just thought it was the smart thing to do. By the third or fourth night, it started to wear on me. Not just in a creepy, this is weird kind of way. I mean, it really started to mess with my head. I couldn't relax. I couldn't think. I'd catch myself looking out the window every few minutes, like someone might be standing out there watching me. I started triple locking my front door. Then I started leaving a light on in every room at night. At one point, I even moved a chair in front of my bedroom door. Looking back, it's hard to explain any of those decisions, but my mind was in a very different place during that time. Anytime my phone rang, even during the day, I'd step outside and answer it from the safety of my car, where I could see every angle around me. It sounds crazy now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. At one point, I even brought it up with the police. I felt ridiculous doing it, but I figured if someone was monitoring me, I had to at least make a report. The officer I spoke to was polite, but I could tell right away he didn't take it seriously. He said they could try looking into the numbers, but unless there was a direct threat or evidence of harassment, there wasn't much they could do. I don't know if they ever tried tracing the calls or if they just filed it away and forgot. Either way, it didn't help. If anything, it made me feel more alone. A few days later, the calls suddenly stopped. That week of obsessively checking my surroundings and answering calls from my car must have deterred whoever was doing it. Part of me wanted to believe it was over, but I couldn't relax. The sudden silence made me spiral even further into paranoia. My mom is schizophrenic, so I've always figured I was predisposed to some kind of mental condition, but it was literally happening right in front of me. I was becoming one of those reclusive people who think the entire world is spying on them. I ended up getting a brand new personal phone number. It was a massive headache. Switching numbers meant re-establishing contact with clients, updating everything linked to my phone, and risking missed opportunities, but I did it anyway. I couldn't shake the feeling that my old number had been compromised somehow. After a few more days of silence, the thing I was dreading happened. One night after work, I got another call. It was exactly like the ones before, but this time I kept my cool. I didn't hang up, I actually spoke. I said something like, "I don't know who you are or why you're doing this, but if it's money you want, I've got it." I went on to say I'd happily pay to be left alone. I gave them my address, said I'd be willing to meet. And then, for the first time, there was an actual voice on the other end. It sounded like they were using a voice changer. All they said was 11 before hanging up. I know what you're thinking, why the hell would I give them my address? Honestly, I can't answer that. I was acting irrationally. I know that. But it's impossible to explain what my mind was doing during that time, so I'm not even going to try. The next few days were the most traumatic and stressful moments of my life. I'm not sure how much I can even type out without getting too graphic, but here goes. I have a handgun in my house for personal safety. I grabbed it from my room, loaded it, and sat at my kitchen table. I waited. I can't begin to explain all the thoughts bouncing around in my head as I sat there. I contemplated a lot of things. I'd go as far as to say that, had it not been for sheer chance, I might not be typing this out right now. Just thinking about that night gives me a sick feeling. 11 came and went. No one showed up. There's no telling what I would have done if they had. I ended up falling asleep at the kitchen table with the gun still in my hand. It was the worst night of my life. But thankfully that was the end of it. I never got another mysterious call again. That doesn't change the fact that whoever it was did serious damage to my mental state. It took a lot of therapy and time off work to recover. I still get chills thinking about how easily I was almost pushed over the edge. I'll never have an explanation for what happened to me. I have no idea how they recorded my conversations, or who they even were. I don't know why they targeted me, or why they stopped. I've since moved out of that house, but there's not much more I can do. If anything, this whole experience has made me a lot more fearful of the future. I can't help but think I'm destined to end up just like my mom. Hopefully, getting this out there will help me heal, even just a little.